Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Trinity College. My name is Muireann. I'm the chair of the Dublin Cycling Campaign. It's great to see so many people here on a wet morning. I saw a few people cycling in on shorts, so I can confirm that it is summer. So this conference has been organised by the Dublin Cycling Campaign. So the campaign has been around for nearly 20 years, working to improve cycling conditions in the city. But it's not just about cycling. We have a vision for a better city, a city where people of all ages can cycle and walk in comfort. So the topic for today is growing cycling participation and closing the gender gap. So why do we need a conference on this topic? Well, the statistics for Dublin are quite shocking. In the last census, it showed that 1 in 4 cyclists in Dublin was a woman, and also that more schoolgirls drive themselves to school than cycle. So it means that girls are going from being driven to school to driving themselves to school without ever trying any alternative. So the National Cycle Policy Framework set a target for 10% of cycle journeys by bike by 2020. And if that target is to be achieved, we need to look at the groups that are not cycling. So women are one of those groups. So we know it's not a single issue or there's a single solution. So we have a great line of speakers, experts in sociology, planning, education and transport. So the objective for today is to look at the gender-specific issues around cycling and come up with ways to address these issues. I'd particularly like to welcome all the people who've travelled from different parts of Ireland, and we also have cyclists from 10 European cities, from cycling organisations who are here on a study visit. So at this stage I'll hand over to the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport, Dr. Leo Varadkar.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, distinguished guests. I'm delighted to be here today to open the International Conference on Cycling, which is taking place during Ireland's National Bike Week. This is the second Bike Week that's been held under my time as Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport, and I'm very happy to see that despite the bad weather, the event has been going very well. I'm particularly pleased that you've chosen to have your conference here in Trinity College, which is my alma mater. I spent many a day sitting on those rather austere and rather cold seats listening to lectures, so hopefully you won't have to do it for more than one day, but certainly a great city in which to have a conference, and probably not the best college to cycle around though on account of all the cobblestones, but I see they have made some changes around the college to improve that. I'd like to give first of all apologies from Minister of State Alan Kelly. Alan's responsible for the National Sustainable Travel Office and controls the cycling budget and knows a lot more than this about cycling than I do, but is a rural-based TD and is currently has obligations in the other part of the country, whereas I'm Dublin-based, and I thought it would be an opportunity for me to come along as the cabinet member with the overall responsibility for transport. I want to recognise as well Senator Batchik, one of my Government Party colleagues, and also Laura Behan, who's here from the National Sustainable Travel Office, and of course Kieran Cuff, who's a former minister in the department. Speaking as Tourism Minister, I want to extend a particular welcome to those of you who've travelled from abroad, from the volunteers of Cycling Academy to Ireland. I'm told that VOCA aims to promote cycling across Europe by linking up various cycling promotional associations and the cities in which they operate. And your presence here in Dublin for this latest conference is a testament to the work of our host today, the Dublin Cycling Campaign. And I know that the National Sustainable Transport Office and the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport very much value the work done by the Dublin Cycling Campaign. Bike Week, which is this week, is probably the biggest cycling initiative run by my department. It has been a great week so far with more promotional events than has ever occurred in the past. And there's more activities on the way, the last of which will be the Green Loop cycle, about a 40k cycle from the Phoenix Park around the western part of Dublin, which I volunteered to do myself, and I'm just hoping the weather will improve, because I really don't fancy driving along cycling along that canal and sloppy muck, but we'll hope for the best. I think it's fair to say that we've a very long way to go in Dublin and in Ireland when it comes to improving cycle infrastructure and encouraging people to cycle, both for general transportation and for leisure purposes as well. My department is of course very keen to encourage cycling across all age groups, whether they're male or female, and whatever profession or outlook on life they may have. I know the theme of the conference today is focusing on the gender gap in cycling, which is something that's very real and a very statistical fact. I've heard lots of different theories as to why this is. I haven't seen any hard evidence as to why it is. I'm sure it exists, but I haven't seen it. So perhaps rather than speculating on it, I might wait until I see the outcomes of the conference to perhaps inform me as to why there is a gap and what can be done about it. There are, of course, lots of reasons as to why government wants to encourage more people to take up cycling, and there are obvious ones. It's, of course, a very, very healthy pursuit. It's the healthiest form of transport by a mile. It's also very safe. Of course, cyclists are subject to some injuries, but if you weigh that up against the health benefits of cycling twice a day, they actually outweigh it in safety terms. It's cheap, extremely inexpensive, and it's very good for the environment. And what's made it cheaper as well is an initiative brought in by the last government, and particularly by Kieran Cuff's party, the Green Party, which was to incentivise people to buy a bicycle and safety equipment and have it deducted against their income tax. And that has been hugely successful in getting more and more people to buy bikes. I wonder whether some of them use them sometimes, and that's a minor concern that I have. I do have a friend who has both a company car and a bicycle, which he bought under the scheme, but he insists to me that he uses both. But I think there probably needs to be some tightening up in that area, but overall it's been a very successful initiative. One of the things we're considering in the run-up to the next budget is raising the thresholds to allow people to buy electric bikes, which of course get you around the city much faster, but are actually now currently a little bit too expensive to purchase with the €1,000 limit, or at least the good ones are a little bit too expensive. But that's not for definite yet, it's just one of the suggestions going in for the budget. The challenge remains to get large numbers of people to change their behaviour, and certainly I want to see a situation whereby it's as natural for somebody to take a small journey by bicycle as they do today by car, whether it's visiting a friend nearby or going to the shops. We're certainly making very good progress in Dublin in encouraging more people to cycle. The Dublin Bike Scheme has been the most successful, or certainly one of the most successful in the world, with more than 3.5 million journeys made so far since its launch in 2009. And I know the Lord Mayor Andrew Montague is coming to speak to the conference later on, and he's really somebody who pioneered that and deserves a lot of credit for that. There has been a lot of investment in cycle lanes, about 150 kilometres worth of cycle lanes in Dublin, about 50 kilometres worth of bus lanes and 25 kilometres of off-road cycle tracks. But I suppose as I travel to different cities, and when you become Transport Minister, you start to look at things totally differently and you see how things work in other cities. What is very clear to me is that one of the big problems that we have is that while we do have a lot of cycle lanes, they're not particularly well linked up, and a lot of them tend to orbit the city rather than passing through it. So you have a lot of orbital routes but not proper permeability of cycleways, which is what you really need to make them work. And of course there is a big problem in that many are of poor quality and many are badly kept and not cleansed properly, which is certainly a big problem. The new road building standards though, which kicked in a few weeks ago, will improve that, at least when future roadworks are being done from next year in the city. It is intended to extend Dublin bikes to a larger area of the city, and also to bring in a city bike scheme in at least one other regional city in Ireland. Hasn't yet been decided which one. It could be two. There'll certainly be at least one city to which is extended, and the capital to do that will come from the government, and that has been set aside for us to do over the next couple of years. But the current ongoing running costs can't be covered by government, and advertising wouldn't be big enough in other cities to cover it. Advertising covers it here in Dublin. Isn't a big enough market in other cities to do that, but we are in interesting negotiations with corporate sponsors who are interested in taking on the 15-year contract to cover the ongoing costs of cycling in another city, which I think could be real positive. Most of you will be familiar with the Green Schools initiative, which is run by Antashka, and that's been very successful in getting school children to walk or cycle to school. The budget for this intervention was protected in 2012. So despite a 9% cut across the transport vote. We didn't cut that at all. And we didn't do that because it's actually been very successful and has been a proven successful intervention in getting young people and school children in particular to cycle to school. The difficulty, I suppose, is that when they go to college, they probably stop, and that's really the next step is to keep them doing that in university. In line with the programme for government, really the commitment to cycling is two-pronged. First is investing in cycle infrastructure, and second is promoting cycling and encouraging people to use the facilities, particularly as a viable way to make shorter trips. There's a €65 million 5-year budget for sustainable travel, and that ensures that we can continue to invest in cycling by providing new and better infrastructure through our programmes to promote sustainable transport. The budget, though, is very much less than was envisaged in the past. It's a fraction of what was envisaged back in 2008, before the recession began, and it was very much lower than what was intended when the 10% by 2020 target was set. In the last year, the department has allocated over €10 million to local authorities to improve new cycling infrastructure. That includes new cycle lanes, parking facilities for bikes, and 3 cycle greenways. And some of you will have seen some of the flagship projects. They're commuter cycle schemes like the Grand Canal Cycleway, for example, here in Dublin, and also leisure cycleways like the Western Greenway linking Westport to Achill. And it's intended that both of these will be extended over the years. Just last month, the department announced a significant €7 million investment in the National Cycle Network. That will support 16 separate cycling projects around the country over the next 2 years, and they're mainly for leisure and recreational purposes. But it will provide an extra 334 kilometres of cycleways, cycle lanes and marked cycle routes. One of the most interesting of those will be along the Royal Canal in Dublin, and you'll be aware that there is a long-term plan to provide cycling and walking ways all along the Royal Canal, and over time linking the canal to Galway and to the Western Greenway, so that it will be possible in a real way for the first time to cycle or walk all the way across Ireland, which would be very good from a tourist point of view as well. But unfortunately it's quite expensive, so like everything else we'll have to do it in bits and pieces, and hopefully to equal quality. In the coming weeks, Minister of State's Kelly will announce an investment of €13 million in over 5 years in active travel towns, and local authorities are going to use that funding to develop walking and cycling strategies, to provide new facilities for cyclists and walkers like cycle lanes and safe pedestrian crossings, and encourage people to use them. We've also identified 3 towns which will be the smarter travel areas, and they are Westport, a small town in Mayo, Dungarvan, a reasonably large town in Waterford, and then also part of Limerick, stretching out from the University to Castletroy. And about €23 million will be invested there in developing infrastructure and promoting sustainable transport in these towns, and a large proportion of that funding is going to be for cycling. And really what's intended there is to transform those urban areas into the kind of urban areas that we're all familiar with, we'll say in the Netherlands, or we'll say in Austria. And the real test, I suppose, is number 1 to do that, number 2 to discover the pitfalls of retrofitting infrastructure in towns that haven't had them before, and the number 3 to test whether Irish people really take to it in the way that perhaps continental Europeans do. And if it is successful, it can then be used as the model for other towns and cities across the country. There are, of course, other programmes that we fund at the moment. There's the Smarter Travel Workplaces programme, which some of you will be familiar with, which is targeted at employers. We're, as much as possible, trying to invest in cycle facilities at train stations. And on the Maynooth line in particular, that's improved immeasurably, whereas in the past there were poor cycle parking facilities. Now there's a lot more. They're visible and they're open, and they have CCTV, which means it's much safer for people to cycle to the station, and they can at least know that their bicycle will be there when they come back. There is, of course, one word of caution that I should add, and that relates to the relationship with motorists, which I know could be a fraught one for cyclists, but it does work both ways. And I know there's been a big move from the cycling campaign to introduce a 1.5 metre cycling distance for cyclists, or a passing distance rather for cyclists, which is something that deserves consideration, and there's a lot of logic to it in my view, although everyone around me doesn't necessarily agree on that. At the same time, the number of complaints that I get about cyclists from motorists through my office really is extraordinary. and there's a growing campaign of motorists who want to have cyclists registered, number plated, and preferably penalty pointed for the number of violations that they do. And I don't want to do that because I don't think it's necessary, and I think it would be really painful, quite frankly, to have to administer that entire system. But bad behaviour by cyclists doesn't help. So that's all I'll say about that. Really finally, I just want to thank the Dublin Cycling Campaign for bringing the vocal group to Dublin today and for inviting me to open the conference. I really hope that you enjoy your visit to the city, that your conference is a great success. I look forward to hearing about the conclusions. Thank you.